They didn't just think I was a failure. That night, my family made sure everyone at my brother's engagement dinner knew it. I sat quietly at the table with my napkin on my lap, while my father laughed about my wasted years. My brother smirked, and my mother nodded as if it were true. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. Then his fiancé leaned closer and whispered, "Wait, you're the room went still. Even my mother froze. Before I tell you what happened next, like this, comment where you're listening from and share if your family has ever underestimated you, because that silence changed everything in that exact moment. My name is Emily Carter, and in my family, names only mattered if they came with titles people could brag about, like realtor, broker, investor, anything that sounded solid, predictable, and profitable. My name didn't. It floated around the table like background noise, noticed only when someone needed something to compare against. The engagement dinner was held in a private room in downtown Chicago, the kind with dark wood walls and soft lighting designed to make everyone look successful. White tablecloths, heavy silverware, a server refilling glasses before anyone asked. My parents loved places like this. They believed the room you sat in said more about you than anything you could say. I was seated 2 chairs away from my brother, close enough to hear every quiet joke, far enough to be left out of the center. He looked relaxed and confident, already acting like the future head of the family. People leaned toward him when they spoke and laughed a little harder. My parents watched him with the same look they'd had my whole life when talking about him, relief mixed with pride. No one asked me how I was. Not really. When someone did glance my way, my mother filled the gap before I could answer. "Emily's still figuring things out," she said gently, like she was smoothing a wrinkle only she could see. My father added something about patience and how not everyone was built for real pressure. They smiled as if they were being kind. I focused on the table instead, the way the candle flickered, the faint smell of grilled steak and spices, the hum of conversations leaking in from the main dining room outside. These small details kept me grounded. I'd learned long ago that if I stayed quiet enough, people would talk as if I wasn't there. My brother's fiancée sat across from me. She didn't take over the table. She watched it. When my parents spoke, she listened without cutting in. When my brother talked about work, she asked questions that made him think more. Her eyes moved carefully, noticing tone more than words. At one point, my father joked about how different my path had been. The table laughed politely. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the one from being turned into a story someone else told. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. Silence had become my habit, not because I was weak, but because I was tired of explaining a life no one wanted to understand. What no one at that table knew was that this wasn't just another dinner for me. It was a test of how long I could sit in a room meant to leave me out and what would happen if someone finally saw the cracks. My name had always come last in talks about success, not announced, not celebrated, just added like a footnote no one planned to read. That night at the restaurant wasn't new. It was just louder. As my brother talked about his future plans, my parents leaned in, nodding at every word. My father added comments, making ordinary achievements sound heroic. My mother smiled the way she always did when she thought she was showing the world a perfect family. Every now and then, one of them glanced my way just long enough to remind me I was still in the picture, barely. Their words took me back. A few months earlier, I'd opened my phone to see photos online from a gathering at my parents' house in Seattle, a networking night with drinks on the patio. People in nice jackets standing near the pool, laughing. I hadn't been invited. When I asked my mother about it later, she sounded surprised I'd noticed. She said it was very technical, and she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, as if leaving me out was a favor. Then there was the holiday barbecue. The heat, the smell of charcoal, paper plates heavy with food. I'd been talking to someone near the fence when my father's voice rose over the music. He was bragging again about my brother, the business, the family legacy. Then he laughed and mentioned me, not with pride, but with amusement. People smiled awkwardly. Someone patted my arm like I'd lost something big, and everyone knew it. Back at the dinner table, my brother raised his glass and made a comment about how not everyone takes the usual path. He said it casually, like a simple fact, but his eyes flicked toward me, a reminder, a line drawn. I felt the familiar pressure in my chest, the urge to speak up, to fix the story, to say something sharp enough to make them stop. Instead, I took a slow breath and held my hands tighter. I'd learned that reacting only gave them more power. Silence at least was mine. The worst part wasn't the jokes. It was the offers of help. My brother once called me before the engagement dinner, his voice soft and worried. He asked if I needed help buying something nice to wear, saying he didn't want me to feel embarrassed. The meaning was clear. I was the issue that needed fixing. At the table, my mother leaned toward my brother's fiancé and talked about my future like it was a problem still waiting to be solved. She mentioned stability and how someone might take care of me someday. Her hand rested on my shoulder, light but controlling. That was the moment something changed. I didn't look up right away. I listened to my heartbeat, steady and calm. All those nights working alone, all the calls I couldn't discuss, all the choices I'd made without anyone's okay. They thought my quiet meant doubt. They thought my patience meant I needed them. Across the table, my brother's fiancée was no longer smiling. She was watching, really watching. And for the first time that night, I felt clearly that the story they'd told about me was running out of space. I didn't flinch when my mother's hand stayed on my shoulder a second too long. I didn't look at my brother when he nodded like my future was settled. Outwardly, I stayed the same, calm, quiet, agreeable. Inside, something finally felt right. The truth was, my life had never been as unsure as they thought. It just didn't look like theirs. While my parents hosted dinners and talked loudly about growth and status, my days followed a different schedule. Early mornings turned into late nights. My apartment stayed quiet except for the soft hum of my laptop fan and the occasional ring of a call from another time zone. I measured success in small wins. Signed papers, cleared payments, short messages saying we're going ahead. There was no cheering, no crowd, just steady progress. I never shared it, not because I was ashamed, but because I couldn't. The work required quiet. Deals were still delicate. One wrong word could ruin months of effort. So when my family offered help or money tips, I smiled and said no. Letting them think less of me was safer than correcting them. That night at the restaurant, as talk flowed around me, I saw how much they'd mistaken holding back for weakness. They saw my rented apartment as proof I'd failed. They saw my plain clothes as giving up. They didn't see the effort it took to live, simply while building something that couldn't handle distractions. My brother leaned back in his chair, satisfied. My father ordered another round. My mother talked about future holidays, already deciding who would sit where. They were comfortable and sure. I felt the change before anyone spoke. Across the table, my brother's fiancée had stopped joining in the family stories. Her eyes kept coming back to me, thoughtful, focused. She wasn't listening to the words anymore. She was noticing the pauses, the times I chose not to speak, the way I didn't hurry to defend myself. I'd seen that look before on calls when people realized they'd guessed wrong. For the first time that evening, I let myself breathe deeper. Not because I wanted saving or praise, but because I knew something they didn't. True strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just waits. The dinner went on, but the feel had already shifted. My parents were still talking and performing. My brother was still sure of himself, yet there was a new tension underneath, like a thin wire stretched too far. I stayed seated. I stayed quiet, not because I had nowhere to go, but because I knew exactly when it would matter to speak. The server came back with more drinks, placing the glasses down carefully, not knowing the air at the table had changed. My father raised his glass first, eager to take back control. To family, he said with a big smile, and to new beginnings. Everyone repeated it except me. I raised my glass a second later, just enough not to stand out. I'd learned to survive moments like this by staying a step behind. My brother started another story about his plans. Bigger house, more duties, brighter future. He spoke with the ease of someone never doubted. My parents jumped in, interrupting each other, making every detail shine. And Emily, my father added suddenly, waving his hand toward me like he'd just remembered something. Well, she's always been independent. The pause before that word was on purpose. My mother laughed softly. She likes doing things her own way, she said, the way people talk about stubborn habits they hope will fade. We just want her to be secure. You know how tough the world is. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the pull to shrink. I kept my eyes on the table, the wood grain, a small scratch near my plate. Anything real? Across from me, my brother's fiancée didn't look away. She tilted her head a bit, studying me as if something had just made sense. Then she asked calmly, "Emily, what exactly do you do?" The question hit differently than the others. It wasn't small talk. It wasn't polite. It was straight. Before I could reply, my brother chuckled. "It's complicated," he said fast. "Some tech thing. She's been trying it out." My father nodded, glad to step in. Lots of people try those kinds of things. It's a hard field. I felt heat in my neck. Still, I said nothing. The fiancé didn't smile. "What kind of platform?" she asked, eyes on me. The table grew quiet in a new way. My parents shifted. My brother cleared his throat. "She's modest," my mother said, touching my arm again. "She doesn't like to talk about it." That was when the fiancé leaned in, lowering her voice just enough to shift the mood. "Is it logistics related?" she asked me. I looked up for the first time in minutes. "Yes," I said. One word. Calm and steady. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Global," she went on. I nodded. My brother laughed again, a bit too loud. "See, this is what I mean." Very vague. The fiancée ignored him. Her focus sharpened, professional now. "Supply chain optimization?" I felt my heartbeat slow. "Yes." The silence grew heavier. She breathed out slowly, eyes still on mine. Then she said, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Wait, she stopped mid-sentence. The impact was instant. Talk stopped. Glasses paused midair. Even the server a few tables away seemed to wait. It felt like the whole room held its breath and forgot to let go. My father frowned. "What is it?" he asked, annoyance starting. The fiancée sat up straighter. "Emily Carter," she said carefully. "You're the founder, aren't you?" No one spoke. I met her eyes and gave a small nod. The sound my brother made wasn't quite a laugh or a gasp. "Founder of what?" he asked. She didn't answer him. She reached into her bag and took out her phone, tapping quickly. When she turned it around, the headline was right there between us. An article focused on the industry. No pictures of me. Just facts, numbers, quotes from investors praising a founder who stayed private. She slid the phone to the middle of the table. "This," she said evenly, "is one of the most watched platforms in the field right now. Quiet start, strong growth early on, worldwide reach." My father leaned forward, squinting. My mother's smile was gone completely. "We've been trying to get a meeting for months," the fiancé went on. "No media, no interviews, just results." My brother shook his head. "That's not." He stopped when he saw no one was listening. She looked at him then. "You said you wanted me to meet visionaries," she said. Her voice wasn't harsh. It was steady. I didn't expect one to be sitting right across from me. The room stayed frozen. My mother's hand slipped off my shoulder like it hurt. Her mouth opened, then closed. She tried again, but nothing came. My father sat straighter, color leaving his face. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked, confusion softening the edge. I didn't answer right away. I picked up my glass, took a small sip, and set it down carefully. "You never asked," I said. My brother stood up suddenly, his chair scraping the floor. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "If this was true, we would have known." The fiancé's eyes went back to her phone. "The whole point was that you didn't," she said. Something cracked in my brother's face, not anger, but fear. Around us, restaurant sounds slowly returned, but our tables stayed separate, like in a bubble. People were looking now, whispering. I felt strangely calm, peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. "I didn't hide it to prove anything," I said, my voice steady. "I hid it because I didn't need approval." My father swallowed hard. My mother stared at the tablecloth, fingers gripped tight. I stood, smoothing my napkin before setting it beside my plate. The action felt final. "I should go," I said, looking at the fiancé. "It was nice to meet you." She nodded once, respect clear in her eyes. I didn't look at my family again. I didn't need to. As I walked out of the private room, the silence came with me, not the old silence of being ignored, but a heavy, uneasy, deserved one. Behind me, no one spoke. And for the first time in my life, that silence felt like fairness. I didn't hurry leaving the restaurant. The night air felt cooler than it should, touching my skin like a fresh start. I walked a block before stopping, letting the sounds fade. My phone buzzed once in my hand. I didn't check it. For years, I'd pictured this moment ending with yelling or sorry words. Instead, it ended with nothing. And somehow that weighed more. In the days after, the silence lasted. No group messages, no careful text acting like nothing happened. When my mother finally called, her voice shook. She asked questions that sounded more like trying to find balance than real interest. I answered politely and briefly. I didn't fill the quiet for her anymore. My brother never contacted me. I heard from someone else that the engagement dinner got awkward in retellings. The story changed to save face. I let it be changed. I didn't need recognition. I needed space. What surprised me most was how free everything felt once I stopped holding their expectations. My work went on, calls, choices, progress. Nothing changed there. What changed was the quiet inside me, the constant preparing, the need to prove myself to people who'd already decided who I was. I realized then that ending doesn't always mean making up. Sometimes it means seeing clearly, knowing where you stop and others' views begin. I didn't lose my family that night. I lost the version of me that kept making myself smaller to fit their picture. And I didn't miss her at all. I used to think being accepted by my family would finally make me feel complete. Now I know understanding myself matters more than getting a seat at their table. That night didn't change who I was. It showed it. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have seen you best, you're not alone. Share where you're listening from and tell me what helped you hold your ground. And if stories like this mean something to you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.